It messes up your makeup.
Siren, you must stop!
When a story jumps 5 years into the future, it makes a promise. It promises that the kids we watched spiral, make terrible choices, and tear each other apart in high school have finally crossed the threshold into the real world. We expect them to have learned something. We expect a clean slate, a dramatic shift, a reinvention. But if the final season of Euphoria proved anything, it's that reinvention is very often a beautifully packaged lie. It's a cosmetic upgrade we apply to ourselves to ignore the unresolved decay underneath. We change our environments, our clothes, even our last names, pretending we've built a brand new house, when in reality we've just built a shiny new facade on top of a crumbling foundation. Nowhere is this tragic delusion more apparent than in Cassie Howard. If you watched my first video on Cassie, you'll remember the psychological blueprint we established. She is a character defined by a gaping, hollow need for external approval, a wound torn open by her father's abandonment and salted by a mother who offered no stability. In high school, Cassie learned that her only valuable asset was her body, and she spent her teenage years weaponizing that asset, desperately chasing the temporary high of being desired. By the end of Season 2, she was the unhinged villain of East Highland High, burning her bridge with her best friend Maddy to cling to the toxic, volatile shadow of Nate Jacobs. But when Season 3 picks up 5 years later, we are presented with a very different Cassie. Or at least, that is what she wants us to believe. The chaotic teenager who screamed in bathrooms and sobbed on kitchen floors is gone. In her place is a woman who seemingly won. She got the guy, she got the ring, and she got the quiet, suburban life she always dreamed. But as the season unfolds, we watch this newly constructed life systematically collapse. Her desperate search for validation doesn't disappear, it simply scales up, transforming from a high school obsession with one toxic boy into the high-stakes digital commodity. She trades the localized gaze of East Highland for the massive, faceless gaze of the internet. This is the ultimate evolution of Cassie's tragedy. This is a deep dive into how her search for love morphed into the cold reality of online exploitation, and why her Season 3 journey is the ultimate cautionary tale about the illusion of starting over. Chapter 1. The Suburban Facade, the Nate Jacobs Delusion. The third episode of the final season, The Ballad of Paladin, features what might be the most quietly disturbing milestone of Cassie's life, her wedding to Nate Jacobs. For a viewer who watched Cassie's desperate, manic behavior in Season 2, this moment is jarring. On the surface, it looks like a victory. She has officially transitioned from the other woman into the respectable wife. She is no longer just Cassie Howard, the girl with the ruined reputation. She is Cassie Jacobs, a suburban woman building a life. For Cassie, this marriage was supposed to be the ultimate act of reinvention. She believed that the sheer weight of a wedding ring could crush her past and validate every betrayal, every scream, and every tear she shed to get to this point. But the tragedy of her marriage is that it was built on a shared delusion of redemption. Nate Jacobs, too, was running from his own history. In the 5-year gap, Nate attempted to reinvent himself as a legitimate real estate developer, hoping to build a respectable empire in the suburbs and leave his father's dark shadow behind. But as we quickly learn, you cannot build a clean future on dirty money. Nate gets deeply, hopelessly in debt with a local mob-like figure named Naz. The suburban dream is immediately stained with anxiety and violence, symbolized most brutally when a loan shark removes Nate's pinky toe as a grim wedding gift in the early episodes of the season. For Cassie, the dream of domestic bliss dissolves almost instantly into a high-stress prison. She thought she was marrying a protector. Instead, she married a man whose past was actively hunting him. But because her identity is entirely dependent on her role as the supportive, loving partner, she cannot walk away. Her trauma makes her the perfect hostage to Nate's downward spiral. This is where the illusion of her reinvention truly cracks. In seasons 1 and 2, we saw Cassie ignore massive red flags because she equated a man's attention with her own survival. 5 years later, she's doing the exact same thing, but the stakes are no longer high school rumors, they are life and death. She's trapped in a house plagued by debt, paranoia, and the constant threat of violence, yet she continues to smile, to play the role of the devoted wife, and to convince herself that this is what love looks like. She believed that changing her status would change her soul, but the ring didn't heal her wound, it just sealed her inside the trap. Chapter 2. Scaling Up Validation, the Parasocial Pivot. As Nate's financial empire crumbles under the weight of his debt to Naz, the pressure falls directly onto Cassie. With her husband's life threatened and their resources drained, she is forced to find a way to generate massive amounts of money and fast. Her solution is both deeply modern and heartbreakingly in line with her character. She turns to adult content creation, launching and positioning herself as an erotic influencer. On the surface, the show presents this as a pragmatic, desperate bid for survival. She's stepping up to save her family. She's taking control of her finances. But when we look closer at the psychology of this pivot, we see that it represents a much darker, much deeper shift in her need for validation. In the first 2 seasons of the show, Cassie's need for approval was highly localized. It was intimate, face-to-face, and entirely focused on a single target. First, it was McKay, then it was Nate. She needed one man to look at her, to tell her she was beautiful, and to make her feel chosen. But in season 3, she scales this pattern up to a global level. Under the intense financial pressure of Nate's debt, she realizes that the localized male gaze is no longer enough to sustain her, either financially or emotionally. She pivots to the internet, inviting thousands of anonymous, faceless subscribers to view her, desire her, and pay for the privilege. This is where her character intersects with the modern phenomenon of parasociality. In the digital age, we often mistake online engagement for real connection. For someone with Cassie's psychological profile, the internet is the ultimate, highly addictive drug. It offers a constant, unending stream of hollow approval. Every subscription, every direct message, and every view is a tiny hit of the validation she has been craving her entire life. But parasocial validation is an empty calorie. It feels like love, but it contains none of the substance. It's a one-way street where Cassie is always performing, always presenting a highly curated, hyper-sexualized version of herself to satisfy a faceless audience. She convinces herself that this is an act of empowerment, that she is the one holding the camera, that she is the one making the money. But in reality, she has simply built a larger, more efficient machine to exploit her own trauma. By turning her body into a digital commodity to pay off her husband's debt, Cassie enters a tragic feedback loop. She is performing for strangers to save a man who treated her like garbage, using the very coping mechanism that broke her the first time. She hasn't reinvented herself, she has just digitized her addiction. She is still the girl standing in front of a mirror, desperately hoping that if she looks desirable enough, someone, somewhere will finally love her. Only now she's waiting for the approval of a million people she will never meet.
Wait, what?
What?
When did that happen?
What does it matter? I don't represent you.
Yes, you do.
Didn't you just leave me?
No, not officially, but Maddy, my head is swirling, and I'm new to this, and this definitely changes things.
Never mind. She'll be there.
Chapter 3. The Fractured Reflection. Fame, Failure, and Maddy Perez. If the first half of Season 3 is about Cassie building her elaborate, fragile house of cards, the penultimate episode, Rain or Shine, is the hurricane that blows it all away. By episode 7, Cassie's digital paradise has completely shattered. Desperate to escape the stigma of OF and reclaim a shred of mainstream legitimacy, she makes the impulsive decision to delete her content and try out for a legitimate acting opportunity. It's her ultimate play for a clean slate. She believes she can transition from an internet cam girl to a respected actress, shedding her past like old skin. But her desperate, self-centered logic quickly backfires. She burns her professional bridge with Maddy, walking all over her sister Lexi during auditions, and is ultimately dropped from the project entirely. The acting gig dissolves, her OF is gone, and the financial safety net she built on internet attention is completely shredded. And then the real world breaks down her front door. With Nate's massive real estate debt still hanging over their heads, the ruthless loan shark Naz comes to collect. Cassie, left completely vulnerable and alone, is taken hostage by Naz's crew as leverage. In her absolute lowest moment, facing actual physical mortal danger, her husband Nate is nowhere to be found. Instead, the only person she can turn to is the girl she spent years betraying, Maddy Perez. What unfolds in Rain or Shine is a dark, tragic parody of the classic Maddy and Cassie friendship. Maddy is now a talent manager, trying to navigate her own compromised adult reality. When Cassie calls her in terror, Maddy is forced to make a stomach-turning compromise. To save Cassie from Naz, Maddy strikes a deal with the dangerous, exploitative gangster Alamo Brown, sleeping with Alamo in exchange for Cassie's rescue. Alamo's crew kills Naz, saving Cassie's life, but the cost of her freedom is devastating. Maddy is now deeply, hopelessly indebted to a dangerous pimp, and the nightmare doesn't end there. When they finally go to unearth Nate Jacobs, who had been buried alive in a coffin trap under his own failed real estate development project, they discover him dead. He wasn't killed by the men who buried him. Instead, a rattlesnake crawled into the air pipe of his coffin, ending his life in the most brutal, undignified way imaginable. Watching Cassie scream over Nate's lifeless body is one of the most agonizing moments of the entire series. She sacrificed her dignity, her friendships, and her self-respect to be his wife, only to end up a widow at 23, drowning in his debts while her best friend had to sell her own body to keep her alive. This is the absolute death of her illusion of reinvention. Cassie wanted to believe she was a mature, independent adult who had navigated her way to a happy ending. Instead, she is exposed as a pawn in a brutal game of survival, protected only by the self-sacrificing love of the friend she repeatedly stabbed in the back. Chapter 4: The House of Mirages, The Final Compromise. When the series finale, In God We Trust, opens, we are presented with a quiet, devastating aftermath. Cassie and Maddy are sitting in a diner, eating a miserable breakfast. Their makeup is ruined, their faces are tear-stained, and the dirt from the previous night's trauma is still practically under their fingernails. There is no triumph here. There is no neat Hollywood resolution. Maddy, staring into her coffee, asks, "What do I do?" Under the shadow of Alamo's debt, her future feels completely bleak. Cassie, sitting beside her, simply takes her hand and says, "We'll figure it out together." It's a beautiful, heartbreaking moment of solidarity. Creator Sam Levinson famously noted that, in a way, the true love story of the season is between Cassie and Maddy. They have survived the worst of themselves, their high school betrayals, and the toxic gravitational pull of Nate Jacobs. But the context of this reunion is incredibly grim. They are no longer two teenagers dreaming of the future. They are two broke, traumatized young women bound together by shared grief and massive financial ruin. As the episode progresses, the larger world of Euphoria collapses around them. Rue dies of a tragic overdose after Alamo laces her pills, and Allie goes on a bloody, desperate path of revenge to put Alamo down. While Alamo's death technically frees Maddy and Cassie from their immediate physical debt, it leaves them completely adrift. They are left with nothing but each other and a staggering mountain of financial ruin. They are forced to compromise, managing a bleak, survivalist existence together in the gig economy of content creation, trying to patch together their lives from the rubble left behind. This is the final compromise of Cassie's arc. She wanted to be a respected actress, a cherished wife, a woman who had successfully navigated her way out of her messy past. Instead, she is left at the end of the series exactly where she started, desperate for financial security, traumatized by the men who used her, and relying on her looks and online content just to keep a roof over her head. The only difference is that she is no longer doing it alone. She has Maddy. But the tragedy remains. Her reinvention was a mirage. She didn't escape the system that commodified her. She was simply forced to settle for a codependency of survival. Conclusion: the unbroken loop. At the end of my first video on Cassie, we asked if she was redeemable. We wondered if a girl so deeply broken by her childhood could ever find a path back to a genuine, healthy sense of self-worth. Season 3 gives us a deeply sobering, cynical answer to that question. Cassie's journey is not a story of redemption, nor is it a story of simple villainy. It is a story about the terrifying gravity of trauma. We watch her try to change her life, getting married, trying to build a career, attempting to secure financial freedom. But because she never actually did the hard, painful work of healing her inner wounds, every single one of her reinventions was just a new iteration of her old addiction. She merely traded the physical cage of Nate Jacobs' bedroom to the digital cage of the parasocial internet. She swapped the judgment of her high school peers for the cold, monetized gaze of anonymous subscribers. She survival pivoted into the adult world, but she did it by institutionalizing her own exploitation. In the final frames of Euphoria, Cassie is alive, and in a show with such a high body count, survival is a victory of its own kind. But she is a survivor who has been stripped of her dreams, her dignity, and her illusions. She is left holding Maddy's hand in a diner, facing an uncertain, debt-ridden future, still dependent on the very gaze that broke her. Cassie Howard's story reminds us that we cannot escape our pasts simply by changing our titles or our platforms. True reinvention doesn't happen on a screen, on a stage, or in a wedding chapel. It happens in the quiet, terrifying moments when we finally stop looking for ourselves in the eyes of other people and start looking at who we are when the cameras are turned off. And until Cassie can do that, she will remain trapped in the unbroken loop of her own tragedy, performing for an audience that will never truly love her back. But that is just my analysis of Cassie's journey in the final season. I want to know what you think. Do you believe Cassie's ending with Maddy represents a genuine, albeit painful, step towards real growth? Or do you think she has permanently trapped herself in the parasocial loop of her own making? Is she a victim of a world that never gave her a chance? Or is she ultimately the architect of her own tragic outcome? Let me know your thoughts, theories, and interpretations in the comments down below. I always look forward to reading your perspectives and discussing these characters with you. If you found this character study interesting, or if it gave you a new way to look at the final season, please consider giving the video a like and subscribing to the channel. It really helps support the work that goes into making these deep dives. If you haven't seen my first video analyzing Cassie's foundations in seasons 1 and 2, you can click on the card on your screen right now to watch it and get the full, unbroken picture of her character arc. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next analysis.